Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Welcome to Digital Currents. Mark, let's just say nothing really happened this week, right? So it's gonna
No, quiet week, and really not much to talk about. Unbelievable. I mean, again, guys, we don't plan this. It's just wild. I mean, we are brothers from other mothers.
Yep.
In that, and actually, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But we have the same dark blue, even with the red polo. When I say brothers from another mother, it's really, I almost sent you this, X. So last weekend, I played Monster Hunter Wilds beta, right? A PS5 game, and they randomly assign you a hunter, and then you can customize it. My hunter looks exactly like you. It's hilarious. I mean, there's the same swarthy look, the flowing hair. I mean, I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. Anyway, so the reveal, I am wearing the orange.
Oh, yeah.
Last week, it was What's Up. This week, it is Rocket Man. And, Rocket Man, Elon was certainly influential this week. And it is Bitcoin Friday, so I got the orange out, even though this show. But Mark, you wore orange on Tuesday, and it was kind of funny. I did. So I wore my orange on Tuesday because I was like, I'm voting for the orange wave, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I want, the orange wave. And, we saw 250 congressmen and senators, they're pro-crypto, solidify or get put in, and Sherrod Brown's out, the anti-crypto army. Elizabeth Warren still won. That was a bummer. But it was kind of funny because I thought people were going to say, well, you can't come in the polling place with political. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, orange man. I'm like, hey, he's not orange. I mean, you may not like him, but he's certainly not orange. I mean, but they didn't stop.
At least not.
Yeah, at least not. I mean, yes, he and many others, like people who tan. I mean, they do turn. I used to live in South Bend, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of fake tanning that goes on. And to the point, it does start to look pretty orange. You're right. The fake tanning.
If anybody said that you can't wear orange twice in the same week, all you have to say is that's fine because we had a double peak this year, right? So this is the big, we should have a bell that you ring and say, hey, we had two all-time highs within the same year. And I think this is really the start of what could be a major boom, not just within, what's happening in the crypto market, but I think, people were kind of waiting on some level of clarity. And we started getting this, right, along the trail. More people were favorable toward the idea of regulation, but then also like not regulation, right? Basically to allow the technology to grow and kind of reach some of its potential, right? And so now that we've got, clarity on what the next 4 years are going to look like as far as favorability towards something like Bitcoin, you can kind of do the math and see, okay, we can get into this in more conversation, Mark, but things like the strategic Bitcoin reserve and what that could mean for purchasing power and services. And I think this idea that people look, regardless of political affiliation, for the U.S. to lead in a global sense, full stop. They've done that for the last 50 years, more, 70 years. And so, that was both from a political perspective, but also an economic perspective and a tech perspective.
Yeah.
We were talking over the past couple of years, Mark, that shift was sort of changing, right? And there were other markets that were highly competitive,
yes,
and for various reasons. And now we have a point where we can potentially swing back towards, okay, let's figure out a way to get some more clarity and leadership around tech and the economy, but driving that on something that is a net new asset for many people, not everybody, not listeners of this show, but for many people, it will still be a growth area in crypto, Mark. So maybe we can start pulling that thread a little bit on some of these ideas that could become mainstays.
No, it's unbelievable, actually. And you set it up so perfectly in the sense of, look, markets hate uncertainty.
Right.
And so, and what they hate more than and so uncertainty went away, right? We got a decision. And the best part is we didn't get the hanging Chad kind of problem or the, hey, the votes haven't been counted yet. It was, got a decision the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
In every election since 76, to today, there's only been 2 in history where we didn't know the answer that day. Now, you and I would argue that we should know the answer the moment the polls close, because we should use it on a blockchain, on a phone, one vote, one, not early and often like Scott. But we got an answer. So a couple things. I think it's interesting. Now, full disclosure, I do not think that, our elected president is the greatest guy on the planet, right? And just full disclosure, I don't think that. I didn't think Bill Clinton was a great guy. I thought Bill Clinton was a great president. And I'm not saying Trump will be or won't be a great president. I don't know. We'll see. But so I'm not saying he's a great guy. But what he did do that was super intelligent, and in my mind, and I'm a little biased here, is you had this block of voters that cared about one thing, right? There's a whole block of voters that care about abortion. There's a whole bunch of voters that care about borders. And there are a whole bunch of voters that care about Social Security. And there are a whole bunch of voters, different voting blocks that care about. Right. There's a big block that care about crypto, Bitcoin. And the left side said, nope, we don't like that. We hated FTX. I'm like, well, you set up FTX, but we hate FTX, and so we're going to persecute you. Okay, fine. And to your point, that drove innovation offshore. We, as global investors, have benefited from that. It means more travel time for us, but which is fine. But we've seen some incredible
valuations too, right, Mark?
Better valuations, yeah.
Valuations, because the U.S. is kind of known for, especially in Silicon Valley, trendsetters, but also record setters.
Yeah. It's like shopping on Rodeo Drive versus your local mall.
That's
right. You can get the same stuff, but you're going to pay way more, or airport, you're going to pay more for a hamburger. So yes, you go shopping in Silicon Valley, you're going to pay more for the same tech. And so that was a benefit for us as investors, but it's still hard. And there's language barriers and all kinds of stuff. But, you've been doing this great thing with this leadership role in setting up the incubator down in Latin America. And, again, my Spanish is un poquito. And, I can take my 13-year-old now with me and he can translate for me. That's good. But
don't worry, we got ChatGPT, Mark. And maybe we will syndicate digital currency using AI in another future.
That would actually be really a cool idea is to use the AI to translate it and then post it in Espanol. That's actually a really good idea. We should do that. Although I don't know if I can listen to myself with a Spanish accent, but
we'll make sure to get you something that kind of fits some of the dubbing will always be a little, Bruce Lee kind of weird.
Yeah, I want an Argentinian accent. If I can request an accent, I want an Argentinian accent. I love that accent. But so what Trump did, again, he still has to follow through. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is there's a whole list of things that he said to 8,000 Bitcoiners in Nashville, and people wrote it down. So you got a free Ross on day one. Okay, that's going to come. That's what that one, there's no, hey, maybe I'll be behind crypto. You said it. You're either going to do it or you're not. So that will be amazing. I mean, the guy has done his time and paid his dues. But so that's one. And then there's some other things that, he said, I'm going to fire Gary Gensler. Okay, so that again, there's cut and dry. Other things like, I'm going to be supportive of digital assets or crypto or Bitcoin. That was a little more squishy, but this strategic Bitcoin reserve has now suddenly really swelled because he didn't use that term in Nashville. He said he thought that the government shouldn't sell their crypto. So that was a good start. And maybe but he didn't say actually acquire it. Now, Senator Lummis, who is, they call Hester Pierce, who I think should be the next SEC chair, but it looks like it's going to go to that Mark guy. I like his first name, but I would still take Hester first. But he's a good guy. He would be fine. Oyeda, I can't pronounce his last name. He can't pronounce my last name either. So we're even. But I think the strategic reserve that Lummis now has a bill that basically says the government's going to actively buy and accumulate Bitcoin. It's pretty amazing because, to your point, now you can say, well, El Salvador has already done that. Yeah, a little. Yeah, they bought a little, but they didn't. I mean, they made it a currency in their country, which is good, but maybe he does call it. I could be wrong. Maybe he does call it a reserve, but
I think he said like stockpile or something like that.
Yeah, right? but the difference is, as nice. I don't know if he's a nice guy or not, but people think he's a nice guy. As great as that is, it's like 4 million people. So I'm not demeaning El Salvador, but it's just not a very big place. And so, even though we've been traveling a lot to the Middle East, we did a podcast on that yesterday, talking about what we've learned, and as great as that is, right? It's 11 million people. I mean, 7 little emirates. It's 11 million people. I mean, it's like North Carolina. So, not to take anything away from them, and they have more money than God, but the point is, when a country with 360 million people and the world reserve currency, to your point, for 80 years, right? This is the 80th anniversary of Bretton Woods. The 80 years of hegemonic dominance. So I think what's really interesting is you got a guy who he got into power by playing populist, right? Last time, the first time he got in, it was way extreme. Okay, and it worked, and he got in. At this time, it wasn't that. This time, it was very different. This time, it was strategically finding voting blocks to appeal to, one being crypto. And I think that was masterful. Now, you say, well, he doesn't really believe in crypto. Yeah, he probably doesn't. I mean, he tried to go in and buy the hamburger at the pub key in New York, and it was kind of a disaster, but whatever. But his son definitely believes in crypto. The vice president definitely believes in crypto. I think he's 6.2 Bitcoin or something. So he definitely believes in it. Vivek definitely believes in it. And he's clearly going to be part of the administration. So I'm excited about to back to your original point. What's going to happen? So strategic Bitcoin reserve, very likely. That is, it's not quite we've all seen the thing, the infinity sign divided by 21 million. Infinity into 21 million. That's number go up. So it's not infinity, even though we do print money like it's infinity. But it's not infinity. But it's big thing. It's bigger than BlackRock ETF. It's bigger than El Salvador. It's bigger than, Qatar or anybody other little country. And I don't mean little in a derogatory sense, but smaller country putting some on their balance sheet, Estonia. This is a big deal. And the other thing, to your point, this is really the most insightful thing in above all my drill. The insightful thing is your point of U.S. leadership.
Right.
We still are the envy of the world, right? People want to immigrate here. We have the best research. We have, the best corporations. I mean, it's a pretty awesome country. I mean, it is. And so people look to us, right? And if we do it, not only is there a good housekeeping seal of approval, and for youngsters, that was a magazine in the old days that would tell you if good things were good and solid and American. Good housekeeping was a magazine, little paper thing that you used to read before you had phones. if that happens, other countries say, oh, okay, we better think about this. But more importantly, it's game theory.
Sure.
And FOMO. And if there's a FOMO into an asset, and the thing about the asset is it's not 21 million that are available, right? There's 19 million that have been mined so far, so there's 2 million left. But the 19 million, there's some that are lost or stolen, so those can't trade. There's the Satoshi wallet, which I don't know if it ever will trade, but so far hasn't traded. Then you got a whole bunch of other wallets that haven't traded. Then you've got the hodlers, right? The people like, oh, you're prying from my cold, dead hands. Okay. So you're talking about a very small amount that actually does trade. And it's kind of like an illiquid stock in the stock market. You know, you can say, well, why does that stock go up so much or down so much? And it's got this big market cap. Well, it's because most of the stock is private or owned by the founders, and the fact that NVIDIA and Google, I think it was NVIDIA and Google, are asking the Supreme Court for immunity from fraud, securities fraud, that's weird. And I hope they're not granted that, because that's like granting Pfizer immunity from prosecution against their products. I mean, that makes no sense, right? I mean, there should be a duty on the corporation to do things that are good and safe and true. And you shouldn't be able to say, well, even if I messed up, you can't prosecute. That's not the way the world works.
I'll go back to one of the points, Mark, that we spoke about, connecting the point of uncertainty, and then also, you know, how it relates to this election and our new president. A lot of people have some uncertainty because they're trying to predict what's going to happen, and that's kind of why we saw some of the prices in the summer go like this, up and down. And I think what we've seen from this president is that he has changed his mind before. In 2021, he called Bitcoin a scam, and on the campaign, he has his own NFT, right? So clearly, this is a change in direction. And I'm going to argue against an article in Coin Telegraph that spoke about the Bitcoin reserve unlikely to happen in 2 years. I'm going to say it's very likely to happen in 2 years, and I'll tell you why. It's very likely to happen in 2 years because the votes are still getting counted on the congressional side. But there's already the majority that's been established, 53 as of this morning in the Senate, and the direction is sort of trending positive towards the House, although not official. Yes, what this will mean is a 2-year period to pass legislation, right? To actually get things done in what is a session.
Yeah, they have the mandate. Yep.
So the U.S. already has a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's just very small. Most governments do, because there were, well, not saying most, there's about 9 governments or so in the world of actually, you know, G8 type of countries that, you know, had some sort of a seizure of crypto assets. And now the idea is to sort of add on beyond that. And so, you know, why would that also be favorable? Because you're coinciding with the all-time high prices in, you know, what will be 2025 and 2026. You could make an argument that maybe it makes sense to actually start this accumulation when it comes down in price.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're playing 3D chess like that, Mark. I think it's very much,
look, only BlackRock plays 3D chess like that. Now, whether someone from BlackRock will advise the government, like, wouldn't surprise me at all if suddenly Larry Fink gets a cabinet position, right?
Yeah. Well, Jamie's already down, right, Mark? Jamie said he's not coming in for Secretary of Treasury, which means he's either definitely coming in or Larry Fink will.
Yeah, well, and look, they always talk about Jamie because Jamie has a lot of capital gains that he would like to cleanse, and they always talk about him. But he's saying it's not going to be him. But it wouldn't surprise me at all for Larry to do it. Anyway, so that I think is real. I agree with you 100%. It's going to happen. And whether it's Vivek or whether it's David Bailey from Bitcoin Magazine is had an influential role. You know, he was down in Mar-a-Lago. And so, I mean, he's definitely there. And then you've got a whole bunch of lobbyists from the industry who are there in D.C. And you got Senator Lummis. I mean, she is dyed-in-the-wool Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
And like there are definitely candidates that say, "Oh yeah, I'm pro Bitcoin." If you ask them what's Bitcoin, I have no idea. I mean, there are definitely some of those, and that's true of any popular issue. If you think you can get elected, I'm behind that. Of course, I'm behind that. So, but there are plenty of really, really good ones. I mean, our congressman here, Patrick Henry, he's amazing, right? He's a true dyed-in-the-wool Bitcoiner, crypto advocate. He's doing a great job. I think he's the head of the Congressional House Finance Committee, maybe. I mean, he's a serious guy. So all of that is positive. And also, it's like these step functions keep happening. When it was launched, people were like, it's a science project. Stupid. It'll fail. But then it doesn't fail, right? And it gets to $1, from 0.003 cents. And it's like, all right, it didn't fail. But it's still a science project. Oh, I'll buy, pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin. Or 2 pizzas. Okay. But that was great because it proved that now it could actually be passed peer-to-peer without a financial institution. And that is the big thing, right? Which is people can exchange value without an intermediary. And yes, the intermediaries don't like that and they're going to fight it. But
and you're really looking, Mark, for like 3 main things, right? You're going to be looking for, this establishment of a national Bitcoin stockpile. That could happen within 2 years. You're also looking for something a little less sexy on paper, but I think it's just as impactful. The appointment of a Bitcoin advisory council. So we're already seeing this globally, right? We talked about VARA yesterday, and then also the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in Dubai. That's basically a commission. If you're a company in the space, you know where to go to, the steps that are required to sort of get compliant with the law and begin your business in earnest. That doesn't exist today in the United States, which is why so many companies are going offshore. And of course, you've also seen this in Singapore, where you have an existing regulatory body, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. They basically now also have the right to create approvals for folks in Web3, and that's why trading derivatives has become so big out in Asia. So those two, along with the third, the U.S. aiming to be a Bitcoin mining powerhouse. I think this one was a little bit interesting, Mark, because maybe this transitions a little bit into AI, because what we're starting to see is that a lot of the miners have not become profitable. It's become a very large game, but it's also one that can be highly dependent upon cheap access to power. So we speak about this all the time. Basically, you're just shooting free energy into the air with natural gas. The flares are already legendary. The obvious thing is sort of capture that into some sort of flywheel effect, whether it's Bitcoin mining or potentially AI. And I think one of the little bits of uncertainty here, which you gotta love, Mark, the pandering is not just from politicians. The pandering is also from CEOs. Once Trump gets the nod that he's going to be the next president, you're seeing the congratulatory remarks from all of the Harris supporters, right? You're saying Suck giving the congratulatory remark, Bezos, Gates. And really what they're doing, Mark, is to ensure that they will not be broken up in this antitrust bid. Because if you remember the last administration that Trump was in 2016, he was against big tech. Big time.
Yeah, now, absolutely.
Which is the king of big tech, is basically in his corner as the CTO in chief. And basically now there's this question about, okay, how are you going to apply something like AI in terms of legislation? Because we were speaking about that earlier this year, that there wasn't really some missteps that were taking in California. We had those regulatory acts when we saw ChatGPT come to the forefront and said, hey, actually we need some more regulation around AI. I think that kind of stuff, those protections go away, and they're going to be led to states and also led to companies. And we're going to see now this jockey for position in big tech, because I think that's the question mark that I have, is sort of, is this going to be a hawk or a dove? We've seen Elon's role, which is also one where he's had his list of enemies, and he also has his own AI influence.
Look, I mean, this is such a big issue. So the idea that Rocket Man, right, from the socks, that Elon, even though, again, he didn't invent SpaceX, he didn't run SpaceX. The woman who runs SpaceX is some super mad genius. but he's certainly involved, and he's certainly the poster child for that. And look, Jack Dorsey pioneered the, hey, I can run two companies as CEO and they'll be both great. And, Elon is, he's not the CEO of both companies, but he's certainly actively engaged in multiple things. The idea that he's going to give up his operating roles and go into the government, I don't know. Now, look, he has a huge incentive. Whether shareholders would go for it, I we'll see. But
yeah,
this is the interesting thing. If he does, the Department of Government Efficiency, okay, so that I'm all for, right? Reducing the deficit, getting us back to fiscal prudence, and making things work the right way, and awesome, be great.
Well, Mark, are you aware also that there's this interesting shift, and we're planting. I think we're not going to be able to cover all this stuff in one episode because there's just so many things to unpack. Which even the continued summer series that we had of chip wars, I think this is happening in AI wars, right? So on one side, we spoke last week about Microsoft and their investment in the UAE to basically become a center of excellence for AI. Not to be outdone, Mark, I'm sure you saw Google announce that they will establish an AI hub in Saudi Arabia to propel language models. I'm shocked that they would do this, right?
Just shocked.
But here's this idea, right? Where you have cheap access to power, you have an American company going offshore, and you have a president that has openly advocated for tariffs, right? And large ones at that, right?
Large, yeah.
60% in China, 100% out of Mexico. We talk a lot about the nearshoring activity. So I think they figured it out that companies from China will go into Mexico and kind of trade cross-border that way.
Yeah.
That kind of eliminates that. But I think this is going to be an interesting thing to watch for, Mark, because really what happens now is that I think COVID taught a lot of the companies that it's not just about working in China. And there was a great report that companies actually have this big pipeline in places like Vietnam, so they can make a very quick adjustment in terms of their supply chain. But if there's this emphasis on kind of bringing things back onshore, and that is, continued from the prior administration, the CHIPS Act, where people don't really dive too much into, but it's actually been pretty beneficial in terms of trying to create a lot of new investment into chip companies here. Our own portfolio companies are benefiting from this in terms of their chip allocation that's going to come through places in Arizona through Samsung and other operations. So
no, you said it, X. Look, the transition from, hey, we're going to build these big mining places for Bitcoin mining with ASICs, and Riot is about to open their giga, mining facility in Texas. It's like I think it's a megawatt. Or gigawatt, a gigawatt. It's huge. It's gigantic. It'll be the largest site. But then you got people like Core Scientific who are saying, well, yeah, we're still doing Bitcoin mining, but now we're going to go into high performance computing and AI data centers, kind of what Saudi Arabia is doing with Grok. And if there's regulatory change in energy deregulation, that'll be a huge tailwind for that. To your point, going to a place like Saudi Arabia that flares more gas, it's the associated gas from oil production, and they just burn it. But if you put a turbine on it and convert it to electricity, you can then transfer that energy anywhere in the world instantaneously through crypto. That's pretty amazing. So there's all of these things happening that are inevitable to us because we're in it every day, and we've chosen to make our careers and our lives about it. But it's not intuitive to the average person who's not really think. I don't really still understand how you and I are talking in real time, into a metal and glass box and the airwaves. I don't really understand how that works. And what I really don't understand is that how every pixel on my screen, even when I'm moving, knows what color, and there's a billion colors. I don't understand, but I don't really have to. So as each technological innovation occurs and people realize that there is this change in, again, data, all this data is being created. We didn't have data really 70 plus years ago, 80 years ago. There wasn't any data. There were no computers, basically. And now we got all this data. What do you got to do? You got to organize it, you got to capture it, Okay, blockchains are really good for that. And then you gotta process it, because like oil, right? The oil sitting under the sand doesn't have much value. I mean, you can value it and say, well, if you can extract it, refine it, most importantly, distribute it. Because even if you have a bunch of refined product, if it can't get into the cars to power them, it doesn't have any value. I mean, a bunch of oil in an oil tank, you can say, well, that has value. Well, only if you can pipe it somewhere or truck it somewhere and get it used. And so all of this is now, people are realizing, well, wait a second, there are alternative ways to store value. There are alternative ways to convert energy into value. I mean, what you and I are doing right now, I would like to think, is converting energy to value. We fuel our bodies. We exchange ideas. We talk about ideas. So people listen to that. That creates some value, some discussion, some dialogue, debate, and search of truth. It's a small example, but that's converting energy to value. And everything in the world is about converting energy to value. And Bitcoin, at its core, is a store of value. And then if that becomes a base layer for all of this other activity, right? AI and inference and all of the things that I read this great piece yesterday where people are worried that AI is going to replace humans. And the guy was like, no. AI just makes us better. Just take ChatGPT, right? Most people use it like, tell me this answer or suggest this idea. He says, no. Use your creativity and use your skills with the English language to prompt it to give you 20 ideas, 20 ways. I tried this. Again, people know I'm trying to learn how to play guitar. And I said, what are the 5 best ways to learn power chords? And it was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, it told me 5 different ways to try to learn power chords. And it was so interesting because if normally I would have said, well, how do I learn power chords? I wouldn't have had the thought of, hey, let's ask it a better question. And I talk about this all the time. Answers cheap. I got lots of answers, but questions are hard. Questions are valuable. And the better your questions, and then one last thing on this. So some college in the UK, a famous college, I can't remember which one it was, but said they're doing away with their English literature degree. And this professor was like, are you idiots? Right? English is now the most powerful tool for driving the most powerful tool in the world to enhance and unlock human creativity.
I love that.
I was like, oh my God. And this goes back to Michael Saylor, right? Michael Saylor done lots of amazing things, not the least of which is MicroStrategy. But something that still is amazing to me is 15 years ago, he's like, the English language is probably not going away. And this internet thing is probably not going away. I'm going to buy all these words.com, faith.com, hope.com, love.com. I mean, mad genius. Just that realization that the power of the words, of forming the right question, of iterating on the right question, and of integrating these AI tools into what we do every day will make us that much better. So it's not you're going to replace humans with AI. You're going to empower humans with AI. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think, that leads to our world in terms of, well, what does this mean for investors and those looking to join what is and has been the most accretive asset class over the past 60 years? Our friends at Co2, Mark, they have targeted a $1 billion fund for strategic AI investments. That does not mean that they will raise $1 billion. They have targeted $1 billion, as we know. And I think what's really kind of interesting here, if you look at their rate of investment, it kind of mirrors what's been happening in the broader VC ecosystem. So they were very, very active in 2021, 170 companies. And in last year, do you know how many they invested in? 30, right? So that is quite a slowdown pace. And we talk about this a lot in terms of the broader markets. And for our listeners, we spend a lot of time analyzing what's happening in the news and then in our portfolio and how it impacts what could be coming forward. so we can make sense of these opportunities. So when you see firms targeting these large numbers, to me, what that indicates is there are opportunities for startups that are looking to kind of get to that next level. And I think when you have that kind of a number, I get more excited about what happens in the mid stage, which has been really frozen. We've done most of our work in the early stage, and I think that's going to be where most activity for wealth creation is going to be. But it is it's a pyramid, right? So if you're stuck here and you can't kind of go a little bit larger, your growth potential, you're not going to be a very tall pyramid. So if you are
growth capital is so important, X. Hence the term, right? Growth capital.
Right.
And particularly in industries, particularly like AI and chips, where capital is really important, right? It costs a lot of money to make a powerful computer chip. It costs a lot of money. Now, software scales without a lot of money. So that was one of the interesting things is, once you make a piece of software, you can sell it over and over and over with almost incremental no cost, so 99% profit. But with a chip, you still gotta buy the resources, you gotta put them in the foundry, so much more capital intensive. But to your point, the stacking of the foundation and then the next layer to get to the top, the actualization of the technology requires a reasonable amount of capital. And so there are firms starting to realize that, yeah, early stage investing is what we do is great. But we found this, the way we do it is we take these small investments in a bunch of things, and we know some of them aren't going to work out. We double up on the ones that we think are really great. And because our funds are a certain size, we can't take our full pro rata as those companies then scale to, billions of dollars. And historically, in other areas of tech, there were these other funds, these growth capital funds that would come in and do those rounds. Then what kind of happened is because everything was on software, these funds got huge, Tyree Global and Co2 and Sequoia and Redpoint and all these things. And they were just huge. And they were throwing these massive amounts of money. And some worked out spectacularly well, like Stripe and others. And others, they didn't work out so well. Because too much money chasing too few deals and making too many investments at those peak valuations, like 21, 22, never turns out very well. In an environment like we have today, where there's a dearth of capital, right? 95% decline in VC. You had the chart of the week a few weeks ago. But lots of innovation because there's lots of tech people that got laid off in the downturn. There's lots of innovation happening. We got the tech cycle. We talked about this. Normally you get 2 out of 3, right? You need capital, you need talent, and you need innovation technologically. You usually get 2 out of those 3. It's rare that you get all 3. 96, you had all 3. Today, 2024, you got all 3.
Yeah, and I think one of the stories I love coming back to, just because you hate this name, Mark, and I love getting a rise out of you with Claude, the name of Anthropic's AI, right? So they are back, and Claude is now partnering with Palantir and AWS to bring Claude AI into U.S. intelligence and defense. So we've seen this story before, right? The largest venture investor, it's not A16Z, it's not Morgan Creek, although maybe one day, it's not even Co2, it's the U.S. government. They invest in more startups than anybody. And defense and AI is a big area. So while we're all trying to figure out, should we, incorporate AI into more parts of our life, the government has already done this by way of investment. And so I think what's interesting with Claude, Mark, is that they try to make their point of differentiation on kind of the safe AI, really position themselves as more conscious, aligned with some of these government interests. And so things like restrictions on classification documents or prohibiting disinformation or weaponization of domestic surveillance, kind of some of the things that the public might be more comfortable with as these models ultimately are training on our data, right? And so this is really something where a lot of companies have partnered with DARPA. We've looked at many of them, and now you're seeing this going to grow and increase over time And I think this is also an opportunity here just to, anytime I can use the word Claude with you, Mark, I think this is just one of those opportunities. I just could not resist. I'm telling you the latest and greatest with
No, I love it. It's just, but what I think is so interesting is, again, how things evolve and how things change. It's a little small nuance, which I think they did it. They think for the good reason, but I look at it and I don't think I really like it. So you got these LLMs, and one of the problems you had with LLMs is because they don't actually do search, they don't actually look at information. They get trained on the information, then they intuit based on what the prompt is. So the quality of the question determines the quality of the answer. What the next word is in the sentence, and it's pretty good, except factually it would have this thing called a hallucination, where it since it wasn't referencing a source document, it would give you bad information. And I used the example of, I asked it about this scholarship thing, and it said, oh, it was started by Frank and Joan Yusko. I'm like, oh, Mark and Stacy. I mean, Frank Eck and Joan Kroc are not Yusko. But my point there is, now they've added in these later versions where it'll pause, where it does that inference pause, and now it says searching. So now it's going out to the internet and searching for a source document. I'm like, whoa, time out. We already got that, right? I don't need to pay extra for that. That already exists. And then OpenAI came out with their search. I'm like, well, remember, search is a flawed thing, right? If I had to wait to search the entire internet every time I did a search, I would even be grayer than I am. And because they don't search, right? They've indexed, and this is the best stat I saw. We should make it the chart of the week, but I didn't think about it. My favorite chart of the week is page views. Mm-hmm. In the last 2 years, page views, like viewing of web pages, is down 50%, 50. No, everyone's using the internet more. No, because people are using ChatGPT. Remember, when you go into Google and you enter a search question, it doesn't search the internet. It directs you to a web page owned by Google. They own half the web pages, and they've already assembled the information. Like when I say, okay, what's the best weapon in Monster Hunter? It knows that other people have asked that question, and here's the page you go to. So because people are using this large language model, which before didn't do that, page views were dropping. Well, if you are getting paid by the number of page views, if you're an advertiser, you're freaking out. And so there's this whole disruption going on. Well, now they're kind of creeping it back in. I'm like, well, whoa. If all you're going to do is send me out to index again, and this can be the same ad-based revenue model, then am I really getting anything new? I think that's something to watch.
Yep. And it's a good transition, Mark, for the chart of the week, because the most commonly overused phrase in finance is, no, but this time it really is different. Is a little bit actually more of the same. So I think we spent a lot of time kind of trying to report back just facts. Everybody can have their own opinion, but not everybody's entitled to their own facts. So we just try to give you the facts.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
You can make your own decision. So what we've seen, though, historically over time, are rallies in Bitcoin price following elections, regardless of the party in office. So there was a lot of kind of question about, well, what's going to happen now? Because we have more sophisticated instruments. There's, kind of maybe a different set of circumstances. So maybe this time is different. But this time was not different, Mark. So I'm going to share the screen here. It is a little bit cut off on kind of the current number, because some of these things are getting updated. But ultimately here, what this is circling is 2012, 2016, 2020. And then we can imagine that 24 is going to be up even higher, right? As we saw the double peak. And there's an argument that's getting made here. And Mark, I would love to hear your thoughts about this, that we are still undervalued relative to past performance. I know past performance is not indicative of future returns. I know our compliance officers are listening. We'll repeat that message. But it's really this idea about this is just code. So this is a pattern that's already been kind of well established to really indicate that, okay, while we have, this double peak year, it's an election year, which usually drives prices up. We have more of an acceptance of the technology more broadly, and we're going to get potentially some more political support from some of the measures that we mentioned. This could mean things like, more all-time highs to come in the next year. Obviously, we still have corrections to look at, but there are some estimates, Mark, and we're reporting this from one such person. Let me make sure I get the name right. It is a gentleman by the name of James Van Straten, who basically compared these Bitcoin performance and is basically saying that, we have an inherent baked gain of potentially almost 50%, 47.8% increase, which could bring Bitcoin to the what, Mark, we always talk about? The 100K ceiling.
Yeah.
Or what do you think about some of these trends, and are you buying this?
100%. Look, I absolutely believe in the 4-year cycle, not because it's an election cycle, but because it's built into the code. And it's coincident with the election, which the election is a trigger because it releases the uncertainty. Up to the election, you don't know who's going to win, and then it happens, and there's certainty. And to your point, it doesn't matter who wins, because we know that the government is just going to keep spending. Unless Elon actually does get in and create the Doge and get rid of it, the government's going to spend. So that in and of itself is a tailwind to financial assets, both stock market assets and digital assets. But more importantly, the code in Bitcoin gives us this 4-year cycle, in that every 4 years the halving rewards are cut in half. I mean, the block rewards are cut in half at the halving. And for a period of time, the sales by the miners continues because they've got some reserves, and there's no upward pressure on price. And what causes upward pressure on price is when someone won't sell, right? If you have to bid more to get someone to sell, then price rises. That's how the markets work. There's a buyer for every seller. Everyone says, oh, there's excess buyers. No, there's equal numbers of buyers and sellers. Oh, there's excess sellers. No, there's equal number of buyers and sellers. So what happened this time, which was a little bit different, in that there were higher transaction fees because of ordinals and runes. And so we got a little delay in the uptick that was caused when the miners were then forced to sell new Bitcoins that they were mining, and they don't want to sell at a loss because they got to pay for their electricity, which is fixed. And so the price tends to adjust post-halving. Well, that built-in movement, which is starting to happen now, I will argue, and what we've seen since the halving from 44 up to 76 where we are today, is that normal tailwind.
Yeah, and that's probably a good point where we'll wrap up and say, I think when you get a lot of people together that are excited, that's going to cause activity. And so I always call this the turkey investment phenomenon. You kind of talked about, you have some of the younger folks coming back in, being with some of the older folks. They're both not talking to each other as much as they should be during the year, but they are talking and doing a 4-hour football game. Actually, no, we have like 3 football games, I think, on big seasons. There's a lot of talking. And so I think there's going to be a lot of activity here. We're hopeful that there is. And I think we'll thank all of our listeners, especially those that then voted. We got to witness, what is an incredible thing, the transition of power into what is hoping to be a better outcome for not just the country, but for the world. And I think we're starting to see some of those signs, at least economically. And we're hopeful that, some of those trends continue. And as always, Mark, we'll remind our listeners, rate, review, and subscribe. If you're not watching us on YouTube, what are you doing? There's a lot of great things happening.
That's right. And while you're on YouTube or Twitter, watch President Biden's 3-minute speech from yesterday. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I hope that he is as strong as he appeared in that video, and that maybe there was just the stress of whatever that some of those bad outtakes over the past year, but it was amazing. I was proud to watch, and I thought that was really cool. So everyone should watch that. It was very inspiring. And then watch, there's a woman, and it didn't happen like yesterday in Celebration, but it was from June. It's this military woman singing the Star Spangled Banner at the Texas State House. Unbelievable. So unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think I'll close with this, Mark, and say I've heard a great quote. I've listened to a bunch of podcasts just like you do. I like a lot of sports stuff in addition to my business stuff. And they said we should treat some of the outcomes of elections like we do with certain sport outcomes. So for a decade, when OSU was beating us regularly, I had some relatively okay exchanges with Ohio State fans. And they said, you know what? We want you guys to get good again. And I was like, you know what? So do I. And so for the 50% of the country that didn't win, we should all kind of extend that hand, because in the end, this is, politics is a bit of a game. But if your side won, then that's great. And if your side didn't win, then also an opportunity for, just as we do in the Michigan-Ohio State rival, to try to be better again next year and to all kind of come together. So
exactly.
I'll leave with that. And as always, remind our listeners to regularly subscribe and to stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.